This is Outnumbered. I'm Meghan McCain. Here today, Harris Faulkner, host of Kennedy on Fox Business. Kennedy, Fox Business Network's Elizabeth McDonald, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the political editor of townhall.com and Fox News contributor Guy Benson. Guy, you are outnumbered.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
It's great to be here. And
the luckiest
Friday.
guy. Yeah.
The luckiest guy ever. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Absolutely. Christmas Eve.
Yes. And it's wonderful
Oh my gosh,
to have.
it totally is. I still have shopping to do.
Me too.
Oh, rush of nerves when you said that.
Yeah, don't mention that again.
Shocked.
That was triggering for her.
I'll pretend like it's not really.
We got to get started first. All right, we begin with the tweet heard round the world. It all began yesterday when President-elect Donald Trump took to social media to talk tough about America's nuclear might, saying, quote, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." Mr. Trump's tweet came after Russian President Vladimir Putin told a gathering of his top military advisors that Russia's nuclear capabilities should be a chief priority in the coming year. Earlier this morning, Mr. Trump doubling down, reportedly telling an MSNBC host, quote, "Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass and outlast them all." Meantime, Mr. Trump's use of Twitter to discuss America's nukes is coming under fire. This reaction from former ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson.
They weren't warranted. What we now have is foreign policy by tweet. President-elect Trump has a cadre of advisors. He should review these issues besides sending tweets in response to Putin. I thought they were friends. Now we're going to have a nuclear arms race because they're trying to outdo each other. This makes no sense.
And reaction from Russia's Putin at his year-end news conference. He said if the arms race speeds up, quote, "It's not us." So, Guy, I'm going to go to you. Any mention of a nuclear arms race just gives me anxiety of any kind.
Yeah, sure.
I also thought Russia was our friend. What do you make of all of this?
Well, Russia's not our friend.
Well, according to President-elect Trump.
Well,
possibly.
I think he's aspirational towards that, which is fine, but you have to be clear-eyed as well. And I think it's safe to say Twitter is such a useful and impactful medium for him in so many ways, and trying to rein him in any respect on Twitter is very difficult. But maybe 140 characters or less when we're talking about nuclear weapons and possible nuclear war at some point, not the best venue for that. And I think, look, one of the reasons, I said on America's Newsroom earlier this morning, one of the reasons that a lot of Americans really liked Donald Trump and gravitated toward him, and he made this point repeatedly in the presidential debates, he said you have to keep our adversaries, our enemies on their toes and guessing and be unpredictable so they don't quite know where you're coming from. And that's intriguing and interesting. But you also have to reassure our allies. And if you're sitting in London this morning, or Tel Aviv, or Sydney, or Tokyo, and you're trying to look at, okay, here's a tweet, here's what he apparently said on another network on a morning show, let there be an arms race, let it be an arms race, you're probably feeling a little bit of anxiety ahead of Christmas, and he has to be more circumspect and aware of himself. He's the president-elect. He's not a private citizen anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny, I'm going to go to you because I know you are, feel differently than I do on foreign policy, but I think no matter who you are, the idea of a nuclear war can make, I mean, for me, it's petrifying on every level. Why are we even talking about this or tweeting about it when nothing has happened?
And somewhere Ronald Reagan is in heaven shaking his head. Like, come on, you guys. And, granted, Donald Trump doesn't have to be sitting in the National Mall strumming a ukulele with daisies in his hair talking about deproliferating. I don't even know if that's a word, but I like it. But I think what he's doing actually is responding directly to Putin in a very different way than President Obama has. Because Putin this week said before a ministry in Russia that they have the most powerful military in the world and they will outmatch any aggressor. And I think Trump took that as, some sort of a direct verbal threat. And he said, oh, really? Well, we'll do something that will make you go absolutely broke. We will spark up the nuclear arms race because Russia can't afford to do that. They've been really good. Last night I was talking to Buck Sexton, a former CIA agent, about with disinformation and getting into these campaigns in various countries and things that are much more cost effective for them. They don't have the capability to go on a full nuclear spending spree at this point.
And I like the fact that this was a brushback pitch on Putin. That's a positive sign in my view. The question is when you have to use very precise language when you're talking about nukes.
Well, maybe he did.
Well,
I was interviewing Evan Siegfried, who is a millennial like yourselves and a GOP strategist, and he said something surprising to me yesterday afternoon. He said maybe this was a brilliant move because this lets the world know that he's not kidding. And maybe this is what people are looking for. And so maybe it wasn't an accident. I can tell you that Jason Miller, shortly after that tweet went out, sent out some clarification. I won't read this entire thing because it's not a tweet. He said President-elect Trump was referring to the threat of nuclear proliferation and the critical need to prevent it, particularly to and among terrorist organizations and unstable and rogue regimes. He also has emphasized the need to improve and modernize our deterrent capability as a vital way to pursue peace through strength. Jason Miller, as you know, has just been named part of that press secretary communications
That's a good
team.
point. But why didn't Donald Trump tweet that?
You can't, because that's like
boil it down to 140.
Well, yeah,
but that's the opposite. Point. That's the opposite of what he tweeted and what he allegedly said.
They called it a clarification. But that's why I put it in the conversation.
But that's the thing. Tweet comes first, then the clarification, which is a reasonable clarification.
Yeah, but then he doubles down on what he tweeted.
Let it be an arms race. That is different than non-proliferation.
Absolutely.
That is the opposite of non-proliferation.
So if you have duality coming out of something, I don't know. Does that accomplish what Evan was talking about?
It feels destabilizing.
Does it?
Yeah, doing it via tweet when Russia and the United States can annihilate each other within a half hour. You know, and your point is well taken that Russia's been teetering on the brink of the recession because oil prices plunging, right? Mm-hmm. I think Russia feels like they're almost like a third world country, how bad their economy is. Yeah. So is it bluster? Is it, bullying via tweet? I don't think
clean up with
and
the
then clean up
team?
Yeah, I don't think that's the way to do foreign policy.
I think that he's just showing he's going to take a very different tack than President Obama did, because President Obama employed really ineffective condescension toward world leaders who would say stuff like this. Right. And I think Trump is saying, I'm going to beat you at your own game. If you're going to get lippy and talk about how powerful you are, then I'm going to put our money where my mouth is. Now, of course it's dangerous. Of course, that's the wrong direction. We don't want to go there. But to your point, Harris, it wasn't accidental. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was saying. And there's a point to each and every
I would
exercise.
say so, because he did double down. And in between that sandwich of I said it and then I said it again is this clarification from the team. So again, is that planned or something different? We don't know. But it's getting people's attention today. You can bet Putin's paying attention.
Yeah, I think the concern is, though, that especially for Guy in my generation, I don't even know what a nuclear arms race would look like or feel like. We're way past the era of
like what Emac said.
It's terrifying.
But it's terrifying, and I think even I think that the point that Emac is making is very well warranted, in that just reading it on Twitter gives me anxiety. The fact that he was talking about this in a phone call to Mika Brzezinski off air, just clarify yourself. If it is in fact just me saying new sheriffs in town, right. It's not going to be like President Obama.
Yeah,
but
there's a history, and it's called the quote madman policy that started with Truman and went through Nixon, threatening other countries with nukes. And we've threatened China in the past. We've threatened Russia with nukes. And is Donald Trump trying to do the madman policy where we don't know what he's going to do? I don't think it's the way to go.
What does this mean in context with the Iran deal as well? I mean, aren't we paying them not to also expand with nukes as well? I mean, there's so many.
I don't know how that's working when they went forward with the ballistics program that they weren't supposed to have, and the UN was supposed to put sanctions on that. Samantha Power, our UN ambassador, went before the General Assembly, and it didn't happen. I don't know that they're listening to us under this current administration.
No, Iran is going to be a nuclear-armed state by the expiration of these restrictions in about 10 to 15 years.
And maybe with Russia's help, we don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And then you look at the Arab states around are worried about Iran, so they're thinking about proliferating and getting into the nuclear arms business. Trump was talking in the campaign about Japan and South Korea. He said a lot of loose things.
Who decides
about what's that? What do you mean?
Who decides who gets the bomb?
Wow.
Well, we should have at least some influence. American influence is very important, right?
That's
and I think generally we shouldn't be encouraging new countries to join the nuclear fraternity. I don't think.
Yeah.
Is that what you think we're doing, though? Because I don't think we're encouraging Iran. I think they want to do it whether we want it or not.
That's what I'm saying. We should discourage it, and we should take actions to make sure especially rogue states like Iran don't get nuclear weapons.
Gosh, the horse is so far out the barn.
Yes, 100%.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, guys. Nuclear war. I'm just kidding. All right, President-elect, I'm joking. President-elect Donald Trump announcing who will be on his communications team after we'd already heard that we might see some changes in the daily press briefings, how we can expect Mr. Trump to handle the media, and Vice President Joe Biden delivering one of the most blunt and direct assessments of why Hillary Clinton's lost the election, what he said, and where the Democrats go from here.
Well, we now know who's going to be on President-elect Trump's communications team. Mr. Trump named RNC Communications Director Sean Spicer as his press secretary yesterday. Also on the team, his campaign press secretary, Hope Hicks, campaign spokesperson Jason Miller, and his social media director, Dan Scavino. And big questions now around how a Trump White House is going to handle the media and access. Some team members have suggested changing the traditional structure of the White House press corps and daily briefings. Sean Spicer talked about that with our own Sandra Smith for Megyn Kelly last night. Watch.
You had hinted with Megyn Kelly on this program last week, maybe daily press briefings aren't needed. Are you going to do away with those?
I think what we need to do, and it's the same thing that Donald Trump's looking at everything in government, is can we do things better? Can we be more effective? Can we put the American people at first in some of these? It's not a question of getting rid of certain things or maybe we add certain things, but I think that we want to be innovative, entrepreneurial as we look at all of these positions and all of these government agencies.
So will there be daily press briefings?
I believe that we'll have daily briefings, but maybe we add an element to them. Maybe not everything's on camera. Maybe we bring more people into the process.
Interesting. Now, one of the things I was reading was possibly more social media would come in,
right.
So you hear from the American people and their own questions in the press briefings. But that's just, talk. We'll have to see how it shakes out. One of the things, though, that a press briefing would give us is the ability to ask about the nuclear situation.
Yeah, that's right.
The president-elect started tweeting about, and then we saw the clarification from the team, and then he had more to say. I mean, this would be a point that I would think that you'd press in with.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing that they were talking about, too, is shaking up the assigned seating in the press room at the White House. And wow, that would be a sea change. So it would make reporters basically have to do more work to get the story, and also introducing more conservative reporters.
Automatically be called on because
correct. It'd be a change, and so it's the nuclear issue. Also, Obamacare. This is a 100-day agenda that's just coming out. Obamacare, trade deals, the border, remove criminal illegal immigrants, and so is this going to be a new world in the DC elite media? Yes, which Sean Spicer and his team is now proposing.
Now, we were told last week to expect something that is a bit more traditional, and that's that first news conference from the president-elect in 2017. So you need a team like this in place to be able to handle the infrastructure of what that will look like, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I'm all for this idea of keeping some of the important traditions, like that opening press conference, like having the daily press briefing, which it sounds like they're going to keep. But I also can get behind this notion of let's innovate a little bit in the way that as an administration we interact with the American people with the press corps. Now, I think as people who work in media and in journalism, we should always be pushing for more access, more transparency, more availability. And it sounds like that's what Sean Spicer's talking about. Not saying let's replace X with Y, let's augment X with Y. Yeah. And I think that's great.
Well, and maybe change some of it so that the questions are about what's actually happening and not coming from a place of something that some of the media might want to sell that night on the evening news. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
I like all of this. I mean, Donald Trump has already changed the game on how politicians communicate with the American public. So to me, it's just a natural sort of recourse that he would obviously do it as president as well. I hate the assigned seating in the White House press room. I think it's very elitist. I think it was Helen Thomas who always had the front seat. Like, why is it that if you've been around long enough and you work for a specific publication that you get this seating? I like that he's mixing it up and making the press corps nervous. I also think that there is a need for daily press briefings in whatever context or another. I actually look forward to having maybe some messages from my president sent to me on Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram. Anything that's going to communicate with as much a wide audience as possible and with young people, I'm all for.
Well, I think everybody's okay with that as long as they get a seat in there. I mean, Fox News has a seat in that briefing room too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's necessarily where you sit, but you do want to sit.
And I think you are going to see I think we're going from a factory setting to an office setting. I think he's totally going to change the environment. And so, what we've seen, the protocol, we've seen the traditions, I think he'll do away with a lot of that. What's interesting to me is Sean Spicer has already had an exhausting day, and he hasn't really begun the formal job yet. And, Dana Perino has spoken extensively about, and we've heard this from other people who've had that job, how quickly they burn burn out because it is such an intense proposition. And for a president who's not focus grouped, who's not fact checked, who doesn't run every single thing down the chain and back up the flagpole 6 different times to make sure it's messaged properly, I think it creates a lot more work for those people.
You know, I think back to the campaign, though, Guy, and this is something that he liked to do, these types of news conferences. So, you know, as you sort of lay that like tapestry over what you would see in a White House press corps, I can see him maybe bringing some of what worked in the field at those campaign stops and news conferences, which was the American people being able to ask some things.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's fine. I'm supportive of all of it. I just think when it boils down to it, the most important thing, regardless of what the avenue is, what the venue might be, or the medium, the press has to be able to ask routinely difficult questions of the president and the White House. That's the bottom line prerequisite. And aside from that, the bells and whistles and how they do it, have at it.
Yeah.
Let's shake it up a little bit. That's cool with me.
Okay, shaken not stirred. We'll move on. Negotiator-in-chief? Well, after apparently getting aircraft giant Boeing to come down on the price tag for the new Air Force One, President-elect Donald Trump's arm twisting when it comes to slashing costs for a controversial fighter jet. What to make of this very public wheeling and dealing? And can it work? Well, it did this time. Plus, Vice President Joe Biden has delivered a brutal postmortem on why Hillary Clinton lost and why Democrats may have been out of touch. Wow. Wait till you see what he's saying, but will his fellow Democrats even listen?
Welcome back. Joe Biden, truth teller, the vice president delivering a blunt assessment of why Hillary Clinton lost the election. Mr. Biden telling the LA Times it's because she never knew why she was running and that she felt a, quote, burden to become the first woman president. Quote, I don't think she ever really figured it out. And by the way, I think it was really hard for her to decide to run. She thought she had no choice but to run. That as the first woman who had an opportunity to win the presidency. I think it was a real burden on her. Vice President Biden also says the Democratic Party was hurt by, quote, a bit of elitism that crept into their thinking. And he says he began to worry that Donald Trump could win when he saw how good the Republican was doing among working class voters in Biden's neck of the woods, Scranton, Pennsylvania. So, Guy, you know, we were talking during the break. I have nothing politically in common with Joe Biden, but I love him. And I love him for things like this because I do think he speaks from the heart. I think he's an honest man, and he's, you know, just gutting it to Hillary Clinton right now about her failures.
That's a tough line, saying she didn't know why she was running. I think she was running because she's been a power-hungry person for an entire adult life, planning for this moment. I don't think it was a tough decision for her to make. Of course she was running. She's been running since the womb. But in this case, yeah, why was she running? You stop someone on the street and say, what does Donald Trump want? They say, oh, make America great again. It's on the hats. It's something that people viscerally understand. With her, what was the slogan? She's stronger together.
I'm with her.
Like, ugh. So I also think with Biden, he's got to wake up every morning kicking himself, being like, oh, I should have run. Because I think he would have. Democrats really didn't want to nominate her. They had to rig the whole thing in her favor. Bernie did really well. I think if Biden's in there, he probably wins the nomination, and I think he'd have a very good chance of winning the general.
Yeah, I think he would have done something else, too, better than she had ever hoped to do, and that is he would have been able to soothe some of those Bernie Sanders supporters. And I think along the lines of what you're talking about, Megan, not because he necessarily would have been so yoked to them going as far left as they want to go, but because he's lovable and he's likable and he's got the likability that really Hillary Clinton could only glimpse to have. So,
and it was such a brutal assessment. He was so candid. He said these people that I grew up with, they're not racist, they're not sexist. That was a real shot at Hillary Clinton, who said that, by the way, at a fundraiser called Half the Country Deplorable, that famous line. I mean, he also went on to say, yes, the Democratic Party should be about identity politics over the economy, which was a weird thing to say. But then Joe Biden went on to say, you know, you can't eat equality. It's sort of like saying you can't fill your gasoline tank with fair share kind of thinking. You know, so he took shots at Hillary Clinton there. And deservedly so. People focus for the first time in the U.S. election, normally, on average, in August. And Hillary, we know, was going to fundraisers and calling people deplorable. I'll tell you something, a lot of first responders are voted for Trump. They ain't deplorable. And they're not not racist and they're not sexist.
And that's the thing. See, Joe Biden has a really good understanding of where he's from, and he knows the type of people who feel completely marginalized. And we hear the phrase forgotten man a lot, and we heard that throughout the election, describing people who haven't been a part of the political process, and they certainly haven't been a part of the economic process either.
Right.
And I think that he could have spoken to those people directly and authentically in a way that Hillary Clinton just is incapable of doing.
He admitted creeping elitism is a problem of the Democrat Party.
That she acknowledged that as well. She acknowledged that she should have changed her campaign. I don't think she was doing anything but pandering to him. I also think that Joe Biden was emboldened by Donald Trump's truthfulness and his delivery, and also the fact that he's essentially done. He's done, and there's something very freeing about that. He's not running for anything right now.
You know what was interesting to me was how absent he was compared to the Obamas on the campaign trail in the last days when we knew Hillary Clinton was struggling and in trouble. Because post-August,
that's true.
we just hadn't seen
Pennsylvania.
her that much.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Pennsylvania,
Hampton saw her,
Michigan.
other places saw her, but
Who do you think? Do you think that was him or her?
Wisconsin didn't see. You mean in terms of him not being on the stuff for her? Oh, I think it was him. I mean, remember the day, and we covered it here live on Outnumbered, when he said he wasn't going to run. It took him a long time to get to those words.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, he had a lot of reasons why he might have run.
But it might be interesting, just this popped into my head, for Trump to invite Biden in for just a very public meeting. I bet you they would hit it off on some sort of level, and there's some synergy there. I'm not sure what it is. The idea isn't fully developed, but if there's some way Trump can tap Biden, I think that would be a smart move.
Yeah.
But Harris, you have
really
raised the question on this show numerous times that why aren't the Democrats listening to people like Tim Ryan? So instead
I think Joe Biden would listen to the next generation. I think he had such a, and our hearts just cry out for Bo, the loss in their family, his son who died this year. I think he had a real heart for that next generation and had even publicly said he hoped to lift that up on his own son. So him mentoring somebody, I think that's realistic right there.
I mean, certainly be good for the Democrats, but, we'll see. They seem not to be ready to listen. Nancy Pelosi's still got that stranglehold.
Oh.
Go, Nancy.
What do you call it? You call it. You have another
Do
word
your
for it. You call
impression,
it
I
pearl
love it.
clutching.
Nancy Pelosi, I drink the blood of Silicon Valley babies.
You seem so happy.
No, I'm talking about executives.
Oh, okay.
And draining their wallets.
May she reign forever.
She will. She'll outlive us all by 1,000 years. President-elect Donald Trump taking on the defense industry once again after apparently getting Boeing to lower costs on its new Air Force One following Mr. Trump's criticism of the high price tag. He's now asking the aerospace giant to come up with a better price for its state-of-the-art fighter jet and pitting Boeing against its main competitor, Lockheed Martin. It's a plot right out of The Apprentice. The president-elect tweeting, quote, based on the tremendous cost and cost overruns of Lockheed Martin F-35, I have asked Boeing to price out a comparable F-18 Super Hornet. Guy, when people talk about military waste and overspending, they always point to the F-35 first. $400 billion for 2,400 planes. And there are a lot of people in the military who say this is just way too much money we're spending. And I think, Donald Trump is right to insert himself in a conversation about defense. What do you think?
Yeah, and he didn't just land on this particular jet by accident. It's come under criticism from multiple sources, including within the military, as you pointed out. And I think that this is sort of an appropriate role for a president to come in and say, despite my campaign promise to rebuild the American military, rebuild and invest should not and does not mean let's just take piles of cash and shovel it out the door regardless of where it's going. Let's be smart about it and make sure that the investments of taxpayer dollars are actually in the national security interest and not just, funding some jobs boondoggle for a huge amount of jets that are way overpriced that we don't necessarily need.
Yeah, and if you Google F-35 boondoggle, you'll get a mountain of paperwork on the subject. But is this the first time a president has so specifically inserted himself into one of these issues about military spending
so
in American
rapidly?
companies?
Yes, so rapidly via Twitter. And by the way, I think he's helping Twitter stock, because that's a company that's been under duress.
Ooh, yeah.
And he's moving stocks. He moved Boeing and Lockheed stock to the downside. The F-35, according to analysts, is so important to Lockheed Martin's revenue line. It's about, some analysts say in any given year, a fifth of the revenues. Wow. That's how just that one.
It's expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. So, should the Iron Triangle be called the Golden Triangle instead down in, Washington, D.C.? I don't think there should be any, I'm sorry, I keep saying I don't think. I think analysts, when they watch it on Wall Street, they are saying, yes, that these guys have been a little bit sold, and that, there's going to be more to the downside because there is a lot of fat that could be trimmed.
No, absolutely.
I'm thinking that if Democrats don't start to get on board, they're going to be, just angry over stuff like this, because this is exactly what Donald Trump said he was going to do. And the more I think, the more he does what he said he was going to do, and it benefits the bottom line of taxpayers, and they can check that box of, yeah, we saved some money.
Yeah.
It's more and more complicated for the political party that did not understand the middle and lower classes in this country. It just gets complicated for the Democrats.
Do you think that his business expertise helps in matters of military spending, or is there something disingenuous about it because he's never served?
This is what America wants. He was very clear. America wanted a businessman. America wants someone who is going to actually put the government's feet to the fire when $25 billion goes missing from the Pentagon. I don't care how much of a military. I'm all for, strengthening our military, giving them whatever they need. But $25 billion that have gone unaccounted for, I don't know what American wouldn't be angry about that. As I have said all along, I'm willing to give him a shot and see what happens. You seem to know a lot more about this plane than I do. If it really is this expensive and bankrupting Americans and we don't need it, then yeah, of course this is a discussion we should have right now. I'm willing to give him a chance. That being said, obviously, you know me very well. I do think he should listen to military experts to really find out if we need this plane. But when it comes to, getting D.C. in order and stop this egregious spending, as my father says, spending like a drunken sailor, then I'm all for it.
All right, well, reminds me, Fleet Week is just around the corner.
Thank you, Senator McCain.
All right.
That's what he says. He says D.C. spends like a drunken sailor.
Yeah. Ivanka Trump, along with her husband and kids, getting a lot of attention when they took a commercial flight. The plane drama, what it says about our culture, and what it means for the Trump children going forward. We will discuss on the couch in moments.
A lot of drama surrounding a JetBlue flight Ivanka Trump was taking with her husband and their children. One couple on board expressing their displeasure with the Trump family taking a commercial flight. The two men ended up getting kicked off the plane. TMZ obtaining this exclusive video of them being escorted out. Earlier, one of them tweeting, quote, Ivanka and Jared at JFK T5 flying commercial. My husband chasing them down to harass them. Hashtag banality of evil. He later tweeted, I sincerely regret my actions earlier today, and upon further reflection, am ashamed to have verbally attacked Miss Ivanka Trump. A witness telling reporters the passenger did not say anything directly to Ivanka Trump, just that he was complaining aloud about how the Trumps ruined the country as well as the flight. That's because special boarding for Ivanka and family apparently delayed the flight. Okay, so this happened yesterday during breaking on the show, and Harris, I talked to you about this off air, that I felt so deeply sorry that this happened to Ivanka Trump. I know what it feels like to be harassed in public because of your parents and because of their political leanings. There is nothing that feels more dehumanizing. She had 3 little kids, her tiny children with her. Her family was just boarding a flight. I don't care how you feel about the Trumps. If I had the Obamas sitting next to me on a flight, I would never dare do anything like this. These people are barbaric. Those little kids will remember this. I guarantee it, because you always remember. And it's disgusting. And I'm so grossed out by the behavior of these people.
You know, what's so problematic, and for those of us who have children and live in public life, and Kennedy, you and I have been around long enough to know, people will say and do things you can't even imagine what they'll say.
Like
and
on Twitter.
Well, but it's in real life. It's not on Twitter. So you're trapped on a plane, and you're antagonizing someone with little ones with them. These guys, these grown men who, after reflection, thought about it and figured out, do they have any idea how that imperils people who are in the public eye? People just aren't thinking. They're so much on an emotional whim. And you know what? I'm all for, coming real with the truth. But to me, that's almost borderline unprotected speech. We're getting into a place now where that's a real threat.
Yeah, and by the way, what happened to decency? And it's not okay to do that to someone. If you would be, and I guarantee these people would be deeply offended if some jerk did that to Chelsea Clinton and her family. And it's not acceptable. And it's okay to, go on social media and express your displeasure. And I understand that, and people do it all the time. And Ivanka Trump knows that it's part of being in public life.
Absolutely.
But don't attack someone. I mean, she's got essentially a newborn baby. She had a baby this summer, and she's with her family. And God bless bless her for flying coach and commercial and all that. She's the Kate Middleton of these United States of America.
And it's so breathtakingly inane that he tweeted out that they were going to harass her.
Yeah.
I mean, so, how liberal
That's
and
threatening.
Right.
They
how,
had a child with them as well, by the way. He was holding his
how
child.
liberal and progressive it is to harass and bully a mother with their child.
Or
right?
illegal.
And what about the First Lady who said, when they go low, we go high? Didn't these guys remember that admonition from the First Lady?
And the thing is, like, if you're an angry liberal right now, if you're these particular angry liberals, like, are you guys trying to help the Trumps? This is a story that turns out really badly for you and really well for them. Here you have Ivanka Trump and her family,
cornered,
the daughter, scion of a billionaire, flying coach on JetBlue, being harassed for no good reason whatsoever in front of their kids. There was another passenger nearby who did a Facebook post about this, who does not like Trump at all, but said she handled it with such grace. She said, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. They come out totally ahead in this, and it makes the opposition to Trump seem unhinged and rude. So it's aside from being the wrong thing to do, it's also politically super counterproductive to do this type of thing.
I go that step further, though. I just get worried. I mean, if people are bold and stupid enough to do something like this, what is the next step? I mean, it's different than having, somebody who's on TV every day go out with their kids and get a little bit harassed.
Yeah.
We know this was one of the most vitriolic, and you talk about visceral and emotional election seasons we've seen in the open air. I think the unpredictability there is not fair for a family that's captive.
And the emotionalism hasn't let up, but I'm going to take a contrarian approach to this.
Ooh.
Maybe, just maybe, the guy was a plant, and Ivanka paid him because she really wants to fly private, and her dad's like, bro, seriously, we have to go commercial for a while. I'm going to be president of the United States. We can't have this fancy pants lifestyle out in public.
No.
It's not all gilded jets. And she's like, but Dad, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll hire a guy to harass me, and then I'll fly private forever.
It is
I
worth
love where
noting.
you started with this, though, Megan, because
crazy
it was
enough to
based
work.
on your own experience, and you know how this feels.
It feels dehumanizing, and I have one memory in particular at a nail salon that involved me and my sister that I will never forget as long as I live. This gentleman is a professor at Hunter College. Hunter College, these are the people that are teaching the young kids of America. Think about it.
Failure to launch. Millennials are staying firmly planted in mommy and daddy's bird nests. A new report from Trilia found that in 2015, nearly 40% of young Americans were still living at home with their parents, siblings, or other relatives. That's the highest level in more than 75 years following the official end of the Great Depression. And according to Pew, nearly 35% of millennials own their own home, down 8% from just 2004. Also, young Americans have been getting married and having children later in life than previous generations. You're nodding, Guy Benson. Is there something you want to tell us? And, of course, there's more and higher student debt. You left. What got you to leave?
I felt like that was the natural progression. Now, part of it was my first job was in a city far away from mom and dad. I was living in Chicago, so it wasn't an option. And what I looked at there, it was the demographic is 18 to 34. I get this sort of thing if you're working your way through college or a couple years out of school and you're trying to make ends meet and save up some money so then you can go afford to move out and rent or buy at some point. But if you're getting into your upper 20s or 30 to 34 and you're still living at home, I mean, with very few exceptions, I feel like there has to be some sort of social shaming, not like mean-spirited stuff. Like, come on, guys.
That's the exact word. I think, I left home when I was 18 and never looked back because I would have been sort of mortified to be living with my mom at that point. I wanted independence. And I know we've spoken about this and we may disagree, but I think helicopter parenting has done such a great disservice to this country because
she's looking at me, ladies.
Are no longer,
wondering why.
They're no longer
the helicopter on the couch.
to be independent. Parents do so much for children, thinking that it's a blessing when really they're capping them
Preach
at the
to me,
knee.
Kennedy.
But then these kids go to college, they expect safety, they expect safe spaces, and then when they get out, they've gone to college for the wrong reasons. They don't have jobs. College is too expensive.
I have a very good friend who is Mexican, and culturally, she lived at home when she was making her way through law school because of the intense student debt, and she didn't end up leaving home until she got married. Now, listen, that's not everyone's choice. When you're faced with for the kind of student debt and the economy that millennials are living in right now, I give it a little more compassion than just helicopter parenting.
Awful what our college
student debt, you should be able to get a job to pay for that.
She did.
I want to know from you just a kind of a raw look at the numbers and where we are with the debt.
Well, it's about $1.2 trillion in student loan debt, and it's the highest ever. And these fat cat academics who act like Donald Trump, they think they're running mini-me, real estate empires in their college campuses, are the ones gouging middle-class families. And so, yeah, you know what? But I was thinking my parents charged me rent when I lived at home. Maybe that's an option. But, I like to call it the Wayne's World meets the Golden Girls phenomenon. People don't leave. But you know what? The kids like it because they get free food and they get their laundry done, too. So and the parents, they're dealing with empty nester
I know
syndrome.
Good people try. I really do. I know good people from my hometown in Phoenix that are really trying to make it ahead.
they
that
are.
lived at home for a little while.
That's fine.
Up until 24.
Just depending on their parents are going to crash
But the idea that my friends are like these infantile babies that couldn't take care of themselves, they weren't. She was strapped with law school debt.
Right. Yeah, but what if you're 31 years old, you've been out of school for a decade?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, the buffer zone kind of goes away, right? It should at least.
I would say
agree,
this, though. The American dream, and we've done the story on the couch a number of times, the American dream has shifted.
Yeah.
And some people think it's unattainable. And I mean, I think if you think you're going to have to work 3 and 4 jobs to get to where you think you can live on your own.
We lived through the housing crisis. We grew up during the housing crisis, especially again in Western sand states. The idea of owning a home is not the American dream. I know people it has bankrupted and ruined their lives. So the idea that millennials should be strapped with the same kind of burdens that other generations have when we see the ramifications, I mean, I just have a lot more compassion for young people as I got anybody else.
Dipped in powdered sugar and angel dust. Fairy dust, rather. Despite all the breaking news this week, some in the media paying a lot of attention to a report in the Washington Post that happened on Thursday that President-elect Trump may have passed over Ambassador John Bolton for Secretary of State because of his mustache. Bolton later tweeting, "I appreciate the grooming advice from the totally unbiased mainstream media, but I will not be shaving my mustache." Meantime, the American Mustache Institute taking President-elect Trump to task, releasing a statement reading in part, "Our quarrel is not political as we are a nonpartisan institution of learning, thought, and facial hair militancy. It merely regards the equity with which we value human capital and potential, in this case, as it relates to Mr. Bolton." Guy, I noticed that you are one of shorn face. You have smooth skin. Perhaps it's not as easy for you to identify with Ambassador Bolton. But what do you make of this brouhaha and the defense by the American Mustache Institute?
Yeah, I just feel like somehow 2016 would not be complete without an outraged public statement from the American Mustache Institute. It's been one of those years, and this is like the perfect little ending note. The John Bolton mustache controversy. Yeah. And I don't want to believe that he was passed over for an important job because of his facial hair, and so I'm going to not believe it. Yeah. But there's a part of me that does kind of wonder.
What do you think, Harris? Is it true? Was he passed over because of the stash, that iconic...
Now, you know that my answer is not going to be what you want to hear.
What?
Can we talk about Aleppo? Because that's what I talked to Ambassador Bolton about.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but that's really all that matters. And he's a super smart man.
Yeah.
And I think that in some regards, the administration will be working with him as they have been.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been talking back and forth with the president-elect. So we don't really know what the future is going to hold. And that stash may pop up someplace else.
Since it's a Christmas season, I think his stash is a gift to the world.
It really is.
So I like how that statement
is very funny.
Right. I like how that statement was bigger than his manly mustache.
Well, I also have to say, like, a lot of women in America really like mustaches. Like, my mother really loves Tom Selleck, and I think in no part because of his mustache as well.
Really
I'm just saying, like, why are we hating on men with mustaches and facial hair? I mean, it can be quite sexy on the right man. And I just feel like it's really sad, the idea that anyone would get passed up for any job because of facial hair. And it's his trademark. You can buy coffee mugs with his mustache on it for Ambassador Bolton. Like, why are you making him shave his trademark?
I think John Bolton deserves a safe space.
He does. His mustache is a safe space. And everyone at the UN knew that. If your boyfriend showed up with a thick and manly mustache, how would you embrace it?
Well, he has a beard, so I don't know. But it's like a shorn beard. But I don't mind. I like facial hair. I mean, I think it's kind of a trend with millennials. I like
it's hot.
facial hair, so I don't have a problem with this. I mean, except on you.
I'm the least trendy millennial ever.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so with the last few seconds we have, I'd love to know what you think will be. And you gave us a list of the 100 days. What order do you think it'll be in?
I hope that they do focus out of the gate on tax reform and Obamacare repeal.
I wish it was retroactive too, and it doesn't look like that's on the first. I know. I hope it's tax cuts. Make it retroactive.
All right, Kennedy.
I think Obamacare is going to take longer. I think he's going to roll back some of those EPA regs right away.
Sure.
Try and get people working.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Obamacare.
Rex Tillerson? Secretary of State.
I don't know.
Let's see the hearings. The hearings are important.
Hearings will be good. All right. Good to see you, because I won't
Thanks for
see you before the
having
beginning
me.
of the year.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We wish you and yours a wonderful Christmas. We're back on TV Monday at noon Eastern. Happening now.